So you were asking me how my father introduced me to White Stag, and I sort of mentioned that he wasn't a part of the leadership of the adult leadership of the program at the time. And he might have been involved with the board or something like that, but he wasn't up at camp, and so I had very much sort of a normal PLD candidate introduction. As a 13-year-old who was about to become leader of a patrol in his troop, I came up, and my dad sort of dropped me off and said, go be a patrol leader and learn something, and then we'll talk about it when you get home. And I got up to camp. I didn't know anybody. There weren't any other boys from my patrol up in PLD or in any other phase. There wasn't anybody I knew on the youth staff or the adult staff. And I don't really think that there was anybody who knew me or knew my background, and that was very useful for me in hindsight in the program, just because I realized that a lot of people could have known my dad and kind of had an eye on me, but it was very helpful. I think that one of the most important things that White Stag teaches young people is how to build interpersonal relationships with sort of every age of potential person that they're working with. So, a kid who's 11 and is coming to phase 1, where I'm on the adult staff right now, is learning to build a relationship with a slightly older child who's a patrol leader. So if they're bridging into Boy Scouts, now they're going in there, they understand what it means to meet a patrol leader for the first time and have an interaction with that person. They're also learning how to build those relationships with their peers, and sometimes they're learning how to build relationships with adult leaders in the program. Not so much that at the phase 1 level. At phase 3, where you start to coordinate with other phases, then maybe you do a little bit of that. But for phase 1 and phase 2, when you're really starting to get into how do you build a relationship with friends in your age group, you don't have any help from your parents, you don't have any help from adult leaders in the program. It's facilitated in sort of this very open way. There were a couple of, when I got to be a phase 2 candidate, there were a couple of youth staff who were, who I really looked up to, who I sort of got to know a little bit, and they were my patrol counselors, and I, got to talk to them and build a rapport with them and interact with them. And so that was very good for me to work with some older guys. But there were also some guys in my patrol who I really got to know very well. One of whom, Eric Lindahl, became a very good friend of mine and went through staff with me for the next several years, and went through a phase 3 candidate year with me also. And so, those were really relationships that I built on my own. And there's a sense of sort of ownership of that friendship that's very important and sort of very different than what people feel happens in a lot of other situations. It's easy sometimes for a young person to come under the impression that their friendship is being facilitated by whether they're, part of an activity that their parents are enrolling them in, and so their parents are sort of setting things up and setting up, you're getting together with so-and-so, you have to get together to study with people or whatever. And to come out here and really have to own that yourself is really a big step for a lot of kids. Was for me, and it is something that I've taken to heart and has been a big part of my life.
Yeah, that's okay.
So you were asking me about when I was a youth staff, what my experiences with my adult staff were. I had 2 adult staff members in particular, 2 scoutmasters, who were really memorable in the way that they handled our training and our approach. And the first one, which I'll tell first because it comes first, but also because it informs the second, is my phase 1 scoutmaster, Rhiannon, who loved to teach from her experience as a phase 1 youth staff. And one of her friends who had been a phase 1 youth staff with her was on staff. So a lot of it was, when we asked her a question, we said, hey, should we do this? Should we plan our meals this way rather than that way? She said, well, this was my experience as a phase 1 youth staff. Take this into consideration when you make your decision. And that was very useful. It was very much, here's something that's actually useful to you. Here's a resource that's really present and really valuable and really can inform your decision making. But it's still your decision, and you still have to make it, right? You still have to take ownership of that decision, but you're not on your own on this. You have this resource. And that was very, very useful. And it also made us feel very close to them, despite the fact that they really wanted us to take ownership of our program, and we really did. The second is my Phase 2 Scoutmaster, Chris Zimmerman, who really knew that really felt, apparently, that he had a very competent youth staff. And one of the things that he kept working on in development with us was limiting our access to resources outside of our youth staff. And if we asked him a question that he thought that someone else on our youth staff should answer, he would say, well, don't you already have someone who knows this at least as well as I do? And it was very useful for us to realize that. And all of a sudden we thought, wait, we actually have someone who's planned a super hike before. And we've actually have 5 people on staff who've taught MOLs, or 4 people on staff or whatever who've taught MOLs, who are really experienced with this kind of stuff. And we really have people who have done meal planning and cooking, because some of us were returning staff and we'd planned a week before, and some of the guys were really experienced Boy Scouts, and we'd all been Phase 3 candidates in a very, very strong year at Phase 3. And so we had this kind of wonderful experience of this wonderful realization. Some of us, it happened a little later than others, but I think as the week went on, we all took this realization that's very important in the program, that we can plan a week, which is what the program is about when they're youth staff. And it shows, like I said, I think it shows this wonderful growth from Phase 1, where you're working with the kind of collective memory of people who are in the program, your adult staff, and then kind of Phase 2 and Phase 3, where you're basically an adult running your own program, and you're taking ownership of your own program. And the adult staff is there to supervise if you don't have a resource for something, or you really need a hole that needs to be filled in terms of a piece of knowledge there. But, I mean, at that point, you're basically running the program yourself. You're planning your own program, you're executing it, and that's a really powerful thing. Okay, so you were asking me about how White Stag has influenced my sort of academic life, my intellectual life. And I'm an intellectual first. That's my world. I'm going to get my MA in Science Studies at NYU, and this is what I do. I spend 12 to 14 hours of my day in this sort of academic headspace. And I mentioned what I think is one of the really amazing things about White Stag, and one of the really powerful things as an academic that I think I get. And part of it makes me feel directly connected with people like Bela, who I think really understood this, which is that White Stag expresses exactly how young and in what way young people, and they're young people, they're not children, these are young adults, even at 11 and 12, can become members of this vibrant community, this social world, this social space. And you have people like, Bill Roberts and these guys who really understand things like religious space and all of these very abstract concepts, and the social psychology that underlies them. But when you look at White Stag and you see how easily that can be made to exist so early in the lives of these young people, that's so powerful to watch. You say, wait, you don't actually need to wait until you're 18 to figure out what it means for something to be sacred to a community, to experience that firsthand. You don't need to be 18, 19, 20 in a religious studies classroom to figure out that people have these really incredible, powerful, sacred experiences, and these experiences of tradition, these experiences of group belonging, and these experiences of being a leader of a community and being a part of that community. I mean, we've got kids here who in Phase 1 who are 10, 11 years old, and when they sit down and they listen to the legend, they're deeply, profoundly affected, some of them. And you see that and you go, wow, why is it that we treat as adults sometimes, why is it that we treat people who are 10 and 11 as though they're not really capable of understanding something like that? When you come up to the week and you see it happen. You see it happen. you know, I have a lot of friends who are in religious studies, and I had a conversation with someone who works in religious studies and works in sacred space, and I said, I'm part of an organization that creates spaces for communities of young people that builds the sorts of social identities that religious studies scholars dream about writing papers on. And I look at that and I said, I don't know that that's really what guys like, you know, Bela were thinking about when they were writing.
No.
It's certainly not clear from when you read some of Bela's own writing. It is in the later generations. You know, it is for John Curini. It is for Bill Roberts. That's something that they've thought about over the last, at least the last 15, 20 years, but I think even back when they were scoutmasters themselves. But it's so powerful. It's so powerful that someone like me has the opportunity to grow up and in that experience, and then as an adult, as an academic who's moving into this world, say, no, these are things which are not, they don't require this sort of whatever we think of as quasi-intellectual space. They don't require that nonsense. They're powerful and they exist in young ages and can be expressed that way and inculcated.